Robin Hood. Just saying the name brings up this incredible image, right? The guy in green tights, robbing the rich to give to the poor. But what if I told you the real story is, well, a lot more complicated? Was he even a real person? That's what we're here to figure out.
Okay, just look at this. On one side, you've got Errol Flynn, right? The classic, grinning, swashbuckling hero. He was exactly what people needed to see during the Great Depression. And on the other side, Russell Crowe. Gritty, serious, a battle-hardened soldier. That's our century's Robin Hood. The character changes so much depending on the era, so it makes you wonder, what did the original look like? Who was he really?
And yeah, that's the big question we're diving into today. He's this global symbol for justice, for fighting the man. But once you peel back all the Hollywood movies and all the old stories, are we actually going to find a real historical person, or are we just chasing a phantom?
So, let's get into it. First things first, why has this story stuck around for so long? I mean, what is it about this guy that we just can't get enough of?
You know, the appeal is actually pretty simple, but it's so powerful. Think about it. Robin Hood is all about escape. He's living out in the forest, totally free, no bosses, no rules. And that idea, wow. Whether you were a peasant back in the day, stuck in a hut, or you're stuck in a cubicle right now, that fantasy of total freedom, where your biggest worry is just aiming your arrow right, that's the dream that never gets old.
And because that dream is so universal, every single generation has basically reinvented Robin Hood to fit their own world. Back in the 30s, when people were starving, the movies gave them a hero who put on these huge feasts. Then in the 70s, you get this tired, cynical Robin Hood coming back from the Crusades, kind of like the soldiers coming home from Vietnam. He's basically a mirror that we hold up to ourselves.
Okay, so this leads us to our first major theory, and it's a wild one. What if we've been looking for a person this whole time, when we should have been looking for a god?
And this myth theory actually has some weight to it. I mean, think about it. The green clothes, living in the woods, it all connects back to these ancient pagan figures, like the Green Man, a nature spirit. Or maybe he's more like a mischievous sprite, like Robin Goodfellow. For a really long time, this was the top theory, that he was just a character people dressed up as for May Day festivals and never a real guy.
And get this, people have been doubting he was real for ages. There's this proverb from way back in 1401 that says, "Many men speak of a Robin Hood who never drew his bow." So people were questioning his existence more than 600 years ago. The skepticism is literally as old as the story. But just when you think, okay, case closed, he's a myth, the historical records throw a massive curveball. So now we gotta follow the paper trail.
Okay, check out this timeline, because this is where things get really interesting. The first time we see any mention of Rhymes of Robin Hood in literature is 1377. But look at that very first date, 1262. A real court document mentions a known outlaw and gives him the nickname Robahode. That's a real guy with that name in the official books. And here's the kicker. That's over 250 years before we have any record of him being a character in those May Day festivals.
So what does that mean? It completely flips the whole investigation around. It looks like the name for a real-life criminal came first, and the whole myth and folklore stuff came way later. The man came first, then the myth.
All right, so if we're back to looking for a real person, the case is wide open again. Let's take a look at the historical lineup. And we've got some pretty solid candidates. You've got this guy, Hobby Hod, a known outlaw from the 1220s. There's another Robin Hood from 100 years later who actually worked for the king. There's a real-life Earl of Huntingdon who fought Prince John. And then there's this outlaw nobleman, Fulk Fitzwarren, whose life story is, well, you'll see, it's almost identical to the legend. Each one of them could be a piece of the puzzle.
So let's start with the one a lot of historians lean towards, Hob Hood. We've got court records from 1225 that mention a Robert Hood fugitive. And the reason he's such a great suspect is simple. It's hard, cold proof. A real guy with that name was a real outlaw. It's the earliest concrete evidence we have.
Then you had this other guy, a Robin Hood from the 1320s. He actually worked for the king, and for a while everyone thought, this is him, because his work history lined up perfectly with an old story where Robin gets a job with the king. It seemed too good to be true. And, well, it was. Turns out another document showed he was working for the king before the ballad was supposed to have happened. So another promising lead that just fizzled out. So frustrating.
But maybe the best suspect of all isn't even named Robin.
This guy's name was Fulk Fitzwarrene. He was a real baron in the 1200s, and just listen to his life story. He had a beef with Prince John. He got declared an outlaw and lost his land. He ran off to the forest with his brothers to fight the king, and in the end, he got a pardon. The similarities are absolutely mind-blowing. It's like his real life was the rough draft for the entire Robin Hood legend.
So where does that leave us? We've got a possible myth, a common nickname for criminals, and a few real guys whose lives look suspiciously like the legend. So, what's the real answer?
Well, the general agreement among historians today is there wasn't one real Robin Hood. He's more like a composite character. Think of him like a mosaic, built from little pieces of different real people, different stories, all pieced together over centuries.
Let's break down how that probably happened. The name? It seems like Robin Hood was just a generic nickname for outlaws back in the day. The story? Well, that was probably inspired by the real adventures of guys like Fulk Fitzwarrene. That whole Earl of Huntingdon thing? That was added way, way later, probably stealing from the story of the real Earl, David. And then, the legend became so famous that actual rebels in the 1400s started calling themselves Robin Hood's men. It's like the story became real because people wanted it to be.
The historian J.C. Holt really nails it with this quote. The answer to who was Robin Hood has to be, there were more than one. He isn't one person. He's the spirit of a bunch of different real-life rebellions all rolled into one.
Which leaves us with one last question to chew on. If Robin Hood wasn't one guy, but instead the spirit of rebellion that lived in a lot of different real people, does that make the legend weaker? Or does it actually make him more real and way more powerful than any single person could ever be?